People say a mother's love doesn't fade, no matter how far her children go. I used to believe that with all my heart. Maybe I still do. But lately, I've started to wonder, does distance only stretch miles, or does it stretch hearts too? My name is Mary Thompson. I'm 58 years old, and I've lived in the same small town in Maplewood, Tennessee, all my life. The kind of place where everyone knows what kind of pie you bring to church on Sundays, and where the grocery store clerk has known your boy since he was in diapers. It's quiet here, predictable. The seasons change softly, golden leaves in fall, heavy rain in spring, and summers that smell of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. This house, my little white home on Elm Street, has seen more of my life than anyone else ever will. It's where I learned to cook, where I cried when my husband passed, and where I raised my boy, Ethan. When I look at the porch steps, I can still picture him there, small feet dangling, school backpack beside him, waiting for the bus every morning. I'd wave from the doorway with his lunch in hand, shouting, "Don't forget your sandwich!" And he'd grin that mischievous grin that always made me laugh. Ethan was my whole world. After my husband, David, died in a car accident when Ethan was just 8, it was just the two of us. The nights were long back then. I'd sit up late, watching the shadows on the wall, listening to the wind, wondering how I was supposed to fill the silence. But then I'd hear his little voice from down the hall calling, "Mom, can I sleep in your room tonight?" And I'd always say yes, every single time. We made it through those years together, not because life was easy, but because we held on to each other. Ethan grew up fast, too fast if you ask me. He was smart, kind, always the kind of kid who helped someone's groceries or stayed late to fix the neighbor's lawnmower. People used to tell me, "Mary, you did a good job with that boy." And I'd smile because they were right. He was a good boy. When he went off to college, just 2 hours away in Nashville, it was the first time I'd ever been alone in that house. I remember walking past his empty room that first night, the bed neatly made, his baseball cap still hanging on the hook by the door. The silence felt heavy. I'd attached myself setting 2 plates for dinner, then quietly putting one back in the cabinet. But I told myself this was a good thing. He was growing, moving forward. I'd raised him to do just that. He'd call me often in those days, every Sunday like clockwork. "Hey, Mom, how's the old house?" And I'd laugh, "Still standing. How's college treating you?" He'd tell me about his classes, his friends, the coffee shop he liked near campus. Sometimes he'd tell me about a girl he'd met, though never in much detail. Ethan was always private when it came to his heart. Years passed quietly. I started volunteering at the church, helping out at the thrift store, baking pies for the local fundraisers. Life was simple again, not full, but steady. Then one spring afternoon, Ethan came home for a visit. He pulled up in that blue pickup truck of his, the one he bought secondhand after college. I was waiting on the porch, waving before he even parked. When he stepped out, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, confident, grown, but his smile was still the same. And then I saw her. A young woman stepped out from the passenger side, tall, graceful, with long brown hair and eyes that looked like they held stories I didn't know yet. She smiled politely and waved. "Mom," he said, his voice warm, "this is Lily." I remember the way my heart lifted and sank at the same time. She was beautiful, soft-spoken, polite, the kind of girl any mother would be happy to meet. But there was something in her eyes I couldn't read, something quiet, distant maybe. That weekend, I cooked all his favorite meals: fried chicken, mashed potatoes, my homemade peach cobbler. Ethan and Lily sat at the table, laughing, sharing stories about their work. Lily worked in marketing, she said, at a small firm in Nashville. She seemed kind, though careful, always choosing her words like she didn't want to say too much. I tried to make her feel welcome. I really did. At night, after they went to bed, I stood in the kitchen cleaning up, the soft hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I remember looking out the window at the porch light glowing faintly in the dark and whispering to myself, "She's a nice girl. I hope she loves him like I do." The next morning, over coffee, Ethan said something that caught me off guard. "Mom," he began, "Lily and I are getting serious. I wanted you to know." I smiled, pretending to keep my hands from shaking. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. She seems like a lovely girl." He grinned. "I'm glad you think so." But there was something else in his smile. Excitement, yes, but also hesitation, like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. Before they left that Sunday, Lily gave me a small hug at the door. It was polite, not too tight, but warm enough to make me hopeful. She said, "It was really nice meeting you, Mrs. Thompson." "Mary," I corrected softly. "Please just call me Mary." She smiled. "Okay, Mary." When their truck pulled away, I stood on that porch until the dust settled on the road. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of something, the kind of beginning that hides an ending inside it. The weeks after that, Ethan called less often. The Sunday phone calls became once every 2 weeks, then once a month. I told myself he was just busy. That's what happens when you fall in love. You make room for someone new. But one night, while washing dishes, I realized something that made my heart ache. I didn't know what was happening in his life anymore. I didn't know where he and Lily went on weekends, or what color her favorite flowers were, or how he spent his evenings. For years, I had been part of his every thought. Now, I was a small part of his schedule. Still, I didn't complain. That's not what mothers do. We wait. We wait quietly, hoping love will circle back, like the seasons. When Ethan finally called one evening in late summer, I almost didn't recognize his voice, not because it had changed, but because it sounded far away, even through the phone. "Hey, Mom," he said, cheerful but rushed. "How are you?" "I'm good, honey. Been thinking about you." "Yeah, it's been a crazy few weeks. Work's been nuts." I smiled into the receiver. "That's what you always say." He laughed, but it was short. "Yeah, well, it's true. Anyway, Lily says hi." "Oh, tell her I said hello. You both should come visit soon." There was a pause. "Yeah, we'll try." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, holding the silent phone in my lap. The porch light outside flickered, and the old clock ticked louder than usual. It hit me then, the kind of quiet that doesn't fill the room, but fills your heart. That's how things were for a while. Ethan visited now and then. Lily came along sometimes, but I could feel the space between us growing. Invisible, but real. It wasn't that she was unkind. She just didn't need me there, and maybe that's what hurt the most. Still, I held on, because that's what mothers do. We keep waiting for the next call, the next visit, the next moment that reminds us we still matter. I didn't know it then, but the hardest moment of my life was still ahead. The day I'd hear the words that would change everything. Words spoken not with cruelty, but with quiet finality. We got married yesterday. But that's a part of the story I'll tell later. It's strange how distance doesn't always begin with miles. Sometimes it begins with silence. After that summer, Ethan's visit slowed even more. The house felt emptier, like it was holding its breath. I kept myself busy, baking, tending to my garden, helping at the church thrift store. But no matter how many pies I baked or weeds I pulled, the ache inside didn't go away. I told myself I was being silly. He's just busy, Mary. He's got a life now. But sometimes I'd see other mothers at the grocery store talking about how their sons called every day or how their daughters-in-law dropped by with casseroles. I'd smile and nod, pretending I didn't feel that tiny sting in my chest. Then one morning, I decided to surprise Ethan. It had been nearly 3 months since his last visit, and though he texted me once in a while, I hadn't heard his voice in weeks. I baked a peach pie, wrapped it in foil, and packed it in my old cooler. I thought I'd just show up, a motherly visit, nothing fancy. I wanted to see him, maybe have dinner together. The drive to Nashville took a little over 2 hours. The roads were familiar. Soft hills, open sky, gas stations that looked exactly the same as they had 20 years ago. I listened to old country songs on the radio, the kind David used to love. When I pulled up to Ethan's apartment building, I took a deep breath. The place looked nice, modern, clean, full of life. I carried the pie carefully up the stairs and knocked. It was Lily who opened the door. "Oh, Mary," she said, startled. "I didn't know you were coming." I smiled, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "I thought I'd surprise you both. Brought a pie." She blinked, then stepped aside politely. "Come in." The apartment was beautiful, neat and modern, but it didn't feel lived in. Everything looked placed, not used. A soft gray couch, a glass coffee table, a big television on the wall. I noticed a framed picture of Ethan and Lily from some vacation, both smiling, arms around each other, sun behind them. But there was not a single photo of him and me. Not one. Ethan came out from the hallway, surprised but smiling. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I laughed. "Well, I missed you, that's what. Thought I'd drop by." He hugged me, warm but quick. "You could have called, you know. We might have been out." "I know," I said softly, "but I wanted to see you." Lily was polite, offering me coffee, but I could feel something in her tone. Not unkindness, just unease, like my presence had thrown off a plan. As we sat down, I placed the pie on the counter. "Your favorite," I said. "Still warm." He smiled. "But you didn't have to, Mom." "I know," I replied. "That's why I did." He chuckled lightly, but the room felt too still. Lily excused herself to take a phone call, and for a few minutes, Ethan and I sat in silence. "So," I said finally, "work going well?" Yeah, it's good. Busy. We're thinking of maybe moving soon, closer to downtown. That's nice, I said, though something in me tightened. I hope you'll still come down for Thanksgiving. Of course, he said quickly, but his eyes drifted toward the hallway where Lily was still talking. That visit didn't last long. I stayed maybe an hour before I felt it, that quiet signal mothers can sense when they're no longer needed in the room. When I stood up to leave, Ethan hugged me again. Drive safe, okay? I will, I said, smiling. You two take care. Lily smiled politely. Thanks for stopping by, Mary. The pie looks delicious. But she didn't open it. When I drove home that evening, the sky turned red and gold, the kind of sunset that used to make me feel peaceful. But all I could think about was how empty the road looked, how small I felt in it. That night, as I unpacked the cooler, I noticed the pie tin was still warm but untouched. I whispered to myself, maybe next time. Weeks turned into months. Ethan's calls grew shorter, just quick check-ins. Hey, Mom, everything okay? Yeah, good. Gotta run. Talk soon. He'd hang up before I even finished asking about his day. Sometimes I'd sit by the phone after he hung up, holding it like it still carried his voice. I didn't cry, not at first, but the ache started to grow. At church, people asked about him. How's Ethan doing, Mary? He's still in the city? I'd smile and say, oh yes, doing great. Busy as ever. And I changed the subject before anyone noticed the truth behind my smile. Then came Thanksgiving. For weeks, I cleaned the house top to bottom, polished the table, ironed the tablecloth, baked pumpkin bread and apple pie. I set out David's old chair, just like I always did. Ethan and Lily were supposed to come down the night before. I cooked all day, humming to myself, checking my phone every few minutes. Evening came. No call. By 9 o'clock, I finally called him. He answered, sounding tired. Hey, Mom. Hey, honey. Just checking what time you'll be here tomorrow. There was a pause. Oh, Mom, I meant to call. We're not going to make it this year. Lily's family is hosting, and she really wants us there. I stood in silence, holding the phone to my ear. Oh, I see. Well, that's nice. You should go. Family is important. He sighed. I promise we'll come next time, okay? Sure, sweetheart. Don't worry about it. After we hung up, I set down the phone and looked at the table, all set, candles ready, pies cooling on the counter. For a moment, I stood there in the stillness, then slowly turned off the lights, one by one. That night, I ate alone. Just a small plate, turkey, mashed potatoes, a slice of pie. I turned on the TV for background noise, but it only made the silence louder. Christmas came and went, much the same. He sent a gift, a sweater, and a short note. Love you, Mom. See you soon. But soon stretched into months. I tried not to resent Lily. Maybe she just wanted her space. Maybe she wasn't used to small-town closeness, the kind where a family drops in unannounced. Maybe I was too old-fashioned. Still, sometimes when I looked at the empty chair across from me, I'd whisper, "You'll come around, won't you, Ethan?" One evening in early spring, I got a text from him. "Hey, Mom, can we come by this weekend?" My heart leapt. I cleaned the whole house, baked his favorite cookies, even bought flowers for the table. When they arrived, everything looked perfect, but something felt different. Lily was quiet, more distant than before. Ethan seemed distracted, glancing at his phone often. After dinner, I asked about their plans. Ethan hesitated, then said, "We're thinking of taking the next step. Maybe getting married soon." My heart swelled. "Oh, Ethan, that's wonderful." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, we're just keeping things simple. Haven't planned anything yet." Lily looked down, fiddling with her ring finger. "We'll keep you updated," she said softly. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Of course. Just let me know how I can help." But deep down, I felt something shifting, like a door quietly closing. After they left, I sat by the window, watching the taillights fade down the road. The stars were bright that night, but I couldn't feel them. I whispered into the quiet, "Don't forget me, Ethan. Please don't forget me." That was the last time I saw them for nearly 4 months. No calls, no visits, just silence. Until one afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message that made my hands tremble. "Hey, Mom, we should talk soon. Got some news." My heart raced. News. The word sounded big, important, maybe wonderful. I waited all day for the call that didn't come. And then, a few days later, it did. "Mom," Ethan said, his voice calm, careful, "we have something to tell you." I smiled, my heart lifting. "You're engaged, aren't you?" There was a pause. And then Lily's voice came through the background, quiet but clear. "We got married yesterday." When I heard those words, everything around me went quiet. I don't even remember what I said right after. Maybe nothing at all. Maybe a small laugh, the kind people make when they're trying to hide a crack in their heart. For a second, I thought I'd heard wrong. "What did you say, honey?" I asked softly, though my voice shook a little. Ethan hesitated. We got married yesterday, Mom. Just a small thing. At the courthouse. Nothing big." I sat there, gripping the phone tighter. The room felt smaller. "Oh," I said after a moment. "Well, congratulations." There was a pause. One of those long, uneasy silences that feel heavier than words. Ethan went on quickly. "Mom, it wasn't planned. It felt right. We didn't want to wait." "Of course," I said, though my throat was dry. "I understand." I didn't. Not really, but I didn't want him to hear the break in my voice. Lily spoke up then, gently. "We'll come by soon, Mary. We just wanted you to know first." I swallowed hard. "Thank you for telling me." And that was it. When the call ended, I just sat there, staring at the phone. The clock on the wall ticked softly, steady and cruel. I'd always thought the worst pain would come from words shouted in anger. But sometimes it's the quiet ones, the calm, polite ones that cut the deepest. I stood up slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the wind, and a few leaves skittered across the porch. It was a beautiful day, the kind of day you'd imagine for a wedding. I wondered if they'd smiled for photos, if she'd worn white, if he'd thought of me even for a moment. A mother's mind goes there, to the details she'll never see. I imagined tying his tie like I used to when he was a boy getting ready for church. I imagined brushing off his shoulders, saying, "You look handsome, son." I imagined him saying, "Thanks, Mom," with that half grin he always had. But none of that happened. I wasn't there. The next few days passed in a blur. I moved through the house like a ghost, doing chores without thinking. The coffee tasted like nothing. The house was too quiet. Every time the phone rang, my heart jumped, but it was never Ethan. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about all the years, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every moment we had built together, and how easily they'd been left behind. I didn't blame Lily, not fully, but I couldn't understand her either. Why would she want to start her marriage without family, without me there to bless them? Still, I told myself, don't be bitter, Mary. Don't let it harden you. So when Ethan finally called again a week later, I tried to sound happy. "Hey, Mom," he said, careful, like walking on thin ice. "Hey, sweetheart. How's married life?" "It's good. We're, settling in. Lily's doing great." "I'm glad," I said, keeping my tone even. "That's all a mother could want." There was a pause. "We'll come visit soon, I promise." I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'll be here." After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen staring at the calendar. I tore off the page for March. April began fresh, blank squares waiting to be filled. I circled one Sunday in red. Just a guess, a hope. Maybe they'll come then. They didn't. A few weeks later, I got a text from Ethan with a photo, the two of them smiling in front of a cabin near the lake. Lily's hand rested on his chest, showing a simple gold ring. The caption read, "Weekend getaway. Love you, Mom." I stared at that picture for a long time. They looked happy, genuinely happy. And that's what hurt the most, because I wasn't part of that happiness. I sat at the table, holding my phone like it was something fragile. I whispered, "You look so much like your father, Ethan." The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet, except for a dog barking in the distance. That night, I printed the photo and put it in a frame. I placed it on the mantel beside a picture of David holding baby Ethan. For a while, I just looked at the two photos side by side, the past and the present, the man who built our family and the son who built his own, and between them, the empty space where I used to belong. As weeks turned to months, the calls came less often again. Sometimes I'd get a text, sometimes nothing. I tried to fill my days, gardening, church, reading, even a few short trips with my friend Carol. But every night, I still checked my phone before bed, just in case. One evening, Carol asked gently, "Have you seen Ethan lately?" I smiled faintly. "Not for a while. They're busy." She gave me that look, the kind people give when they don't want to say what they're thinking. "Maybe you should visit. Surprise them." I shook my head. "No, I learned my lesson about surprises." Carol nodded slowly. "He'll come around, Mary. Boys always do." "Maybe," I said softly, "but sometimes they come around when it's too late." Summer came again, bright, hot, full of long days and longer evenings. The garden bloomed beautifully that year. My roses were taller than ever, the air thick with their scent. One morning, I was out watering the plants when a car pulled up. Ethan's truck. My heart skipped. He stepped out, looking tired but smiling faintly. "Hey, Mom." I froze for a second, then smiled back. "Well, look who finally remembered where he came from." He laughed quietly and hugged me. "It's good to see you." When I looked over his shoulder, I realized Lily wasn't with him. "She had some errands," he said quickly, as if reading my mind. "Wanted me to come see you." "Alone?" I teased lightly. He chuckled, sitting down on the porch steps. "Yeah, well, figured I owed you a visit. We sat there for a while, just talking about the weather, the town, his job. It felt almost normal, like the old days. But then his tone shifted. "Mom," he said softly, "I know the wedding thing probably hurt you." I looked at him, forcing a smile. "Oh, honey, don't worry about that." "No, really," he said, his voice quiet. "I wanted to tell you sooner. Lily didn't want a big deal. She thought it'd be easier." "Easier?" I repeated, a small tremor in my chest. He sighed. "Yeah, she doesn't do well with attention, and she was worried about planning, timing, all that." I nodded slowly. "And you agreed?" He looked down. "Yeah." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the soft rustle of leaves. "You know," I said finally, "when you were little, you used to tell me that when you got married, you wanted me to be the first to know. You'd say, 'Mom, you'll sit in the front row.'" He looked at me, eyes soft. "I remember." "And now?" I asked quietly. He swallowed hard. "Things just happened fast." I nodded, more to myself than to him. "They always do." He reached out and touched my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am." I smiled faintly. "You don't need to apologize. You're happy. That's what matters." But deep down, a part of me whispered, "I just wish I'd been there to see it." After he left that day, I stood on the porch watching his truck disappear down the road. My hand still felt warm where he'd held it. For a while, I thought that visit meant things would get better, that maybe he'd start calling more, that maybe we'd heal that quiet space between us. But weeks passed again, and nothing changed. That's the hardest part of heartbreak, when it starts to feel normal. You stop expecting the phone to ring. You stop setting extra plates at the table. You stop hoping for the sound of footsteps on the porch. Life becomes smaller, quieter. You learn to make peace with the silence, even when it hurts. And so I did. Or at least, I tried. The days after Ethan's visit felt heavier than before. It's strange how hope can weigh so much. You think it'll lift you, make things brighter. But sometimes, hope is what hurts most because it keeps you waiting. Every morning, I'd wake up and glance at the phone, half expecting a new message. Every evening, I'd tell myself, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow kept slipping away quietly, like sand between my fingers. I began to notice small things, how quiet the evenings were, how my voice echoed softly when I spoke aloud just to fill the silence. Sometimes I'd hum to myself while cooking dinner, pretending there was someone in the next room who might listen. One evening, as I set down a single plate at the table, I caught myself whispering, "You're being silly, Mary." But the truth was, I was lonely. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, the kind that comes from being forgotten. There's a difference. I had friends, church, neighbors who waved, but none of it filled that quiet ache that came from knowing your child has built a new life, one that doesn't really have space for you anymore. I didn't blame Ethan or Lily, not completely. They were young, busy, building a world of their own. But I couldn't help wondering, did I do something wrong? Did I hold on too tightly? Or maybe not tightly enough. One night, I pulled out the old wooden box that sat at the back of my closet. Inside were memories, baby shoes, school drawings, birthday cards. I lifted one, a crayon drawing of a stick figure woman with messy yellow hair, holding hands with a smaller one. Above it, In crooked letters, he'd written, "Me and Mommy." I smiled, though my eyes burned. I whispered, "You were always so proud of that one." I ran my fingers over the paper, feeling every ridge like it was part of my heart. That box held the years I could never get back. The next morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a while. I baked Ethan's favorite, cinnamon rolls, the kind I used to make on his birthdays. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. For a moment, it almost felt like old times. I packed them neatly into a tin, tied it with a ribbon, and wrote a small note. "For you both. Love, Mom." Then I mailed it to their new address, the one Ethan had texted months ago. Days passed, no reply. Then one afternoon, a message came through. "Thanks for the cinnamon rolls, Mom. They were great." That was it. No call, no photo, no visit. Just that short line. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I whispered, "You're welcome," even though he couldn't hear me. A week later, Carol dropped by. She could tell something was off. "You're awfully quiet today," she said, sipping her coffee. I smiled faintly. "Just thinking." "About Ethan?" "Always." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You know you don't have to sit here waiting for him to call. You could go visit." I shook my head. "I don't want to feel like I'm intruding." "Mary, you're his mother," she said softly. "You can't intrude on your own child." But she didn't understand. It wasn't that simple anymore. It used to be that when Ethan came home, the house came alive. His laughter would bounce off the walls, his voice filling every corner. Now even the thought of visiting him made me nervous, like I'd be stepping into someone else's life. Still, one evening, after too many nights of silence, I decided to call him. He picked up after a few rings. "Hey, Mom." "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "How are you two doing?" "Good, good. Just busy, you know." "I understand. I was thinking maybe I could stop by sometime. Bring dinner, maybe? I haven't seen you both in months." There was a pause. Then he said, Maybe next week, Mom. Things are kind of hectic right now." "Oh, of course," I said quickly. "I didn't mean to rush you." He hesitated. "I'll call you soon, okay?" "Sure, honey. Take care." When I hung up, the silence in the house felt sharper. I went to the porch and sat there for a long time, watching the sunset fade behind the trees. The air smelled of summer grass and dust. Somewhere in the distance a train passed, its low hum stretching across the valley, and for the first time I let myself cry. Not the loud kind, just quiet tears that slipped down my face as the light disappeared. I whispered to the wind, "I just wanted to be part of your joy, Ethan." That night I dreamed of him as a child again, running barefoot through the yard, laughing, shouting, "Catch me, Mom!" His little hand reaching back for mine. And when I almost caught him, he'd turn and grin, that same grin he still had, only now I rarely saw him in person. When I woke up, I stayed in bed for a while, staring at the ceiling. The dream had felt so real. It was as if my heart had borrowed a moment from the past, just to remind me what love used to feel like. I decided then that I couldn't keep waiting like this. The next morning, I wrote him a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter, ink on paper, like we used to. It took me hours to find the right words. I wanted it to be honest, not heavy, loving, not guilt-filled. When I finally finished, it read, "My dear Ethan, I hope you and Lily are doing well. I wanted to write instead of calling because sometimes it's easier to say things this way. I miss you, son. Not because I'm lonely, but because you're part of me. You've always been.
I don't want to take your time or get in the way of your life. I just want to be part of it, even a little. Maybe dinner someday, or a visit. Maybe a story or two over coffee. I promise I won't talk too long. I'm proud of you, Ethan. Always have been, always will be. Love, Mom. I sealed the letter and mailed it. Then I waited. A week passed, nothing. 2 weeks, still nothing. By the 3rd week, I began to think maybe he'd read it and didn't know how to respond. Maybe Lily didn't like the idea of me coming around. Maybe I said too much. But then, one afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. My heart skipped when I saw his handwriting. I took it inside and sat down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly as I opened it. It was short, just a few lines. "Hey, Mom, I got your letter. Thank you. I'm sorry I've been distant. Life's just been crazy lately, but I promise I'll come see you soon. I love you, Ethan." I pressed the paper to my chest. Just that simple note, it felt like sunlight breaking through after a long storm. For days, I walked lighter. I even started aching again. I told Carol, "He wrote back. He said he'll come soon." She smiled wide. "See, I told you, boys always come around." And for the first time in months, I believed her. But soon stretched longer than I expected. One Sunday morning, as I was leaving church, I overheard 2 women talking near the gate. "Did you see Ethan and Lily's photos online? They look so happy." I froze. "What photos?" I asked, stepping closer. "Oh, the ones from their reception. They had a small gathering last weekend. Looked beautiful." My heart sank. "Reception?" "Yes," the woman said kindly. "I thought you'd be there." I managed a small smile. "No, I couldn't make it." But inside, it felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. They'd had a reception, a celebration, and once again, I hadn't even been told. That evening, I sat in the same chair by the window, staring at the fading light. My heart felt heavy, but this time, something inside me broke quietly. Not from anger, not even from sadness, but from exhaustion. I whispered to myself, maybe I'm just not part of that world anymore. For the first time, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't wait for a message. I just sat there, hands folded, letting the quiet fill the room.
Sometimes, silence becomes its own kind of answer. A few days passed after I heard about the reception. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't text. I just went quiet. It wasn't out of anger. I think at some point, pain just becomes tired. You stop asking why because you already know the answer. People move on, even from the ones who raised them. That week, I kept myself busy. I cleaned the attic, tended to the garden, even painted the old porch swing that had been sitting unused for years. The house looked brighter, but inside, I felt emptier. Every time the wind blew through the trees, I thought of Ethan as a little boy, chasing leaves, laughing. Those memories came so easily it hurt. I told myself, maybe he'll come next Sunday. Maybe he'll notice my silence. But Sunday came and went, and no one knocked on the door. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table, my hands resting on a cup of tea gone cold. I whispered softly, maybe this is just how it ends. Some stories don't have neat endings. A few days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Ethan's handwriting. My heart started to race. I opened it carefully, the paper trembling in my hands. Inside was a letter, longer than his last one. The first words already made my eyes sting. Mom, I don't even know how to start.
I guess I owe you an apology. A real one. I know I've hurt you, and I can't stand knowing that I made you feel forgotten. When Lily and I got married, we thought we were doing what made sense at the time. She didn't want a big ceremony, and I told myself it didn't matter. But lately, it's been eating at me. The way I left you out, the way I let distance grow between us. Last week, we had a small reception. It wasn't anything fancy, but the whole time something felt wrong. Everyone kept asking where you were, and I couldn't answer. I couldn't even look at Lily when they asked, because deep down, I knew you should have been there. After everyone left, Lily cried. She said she felt ashamed. She said she didn't realize how much she'd pushed you away. We both did. We talked for hours, Mom, about you, about the way you raised me, about how patient and kind you've always been. Lily told me she wants to make things right, that we both do. If you'll let us, we want to come home this Sunday. We'd like to sit with you, eat dinner, and just talk. No phones, no rush, no excuses, just us. I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry it took me this long to show it. Your son, Ethan. By the time I finished reading, my tears had soaked the page. I pressed it against my heart and whispered, "Thank you, God." It wasn't about the apology. It was about being seen again, about finally knowing that he remembered who I was to him. For the first time in months, my house didn't feel so empty. I spent the next few days preparing quietly. Nothing fancy, just love in small details. Fresh flowers on the table, clean linens, the smell of baked bread and rosemary chicken filling the air. The house looked brighter, but inside, I felt emptier. On Sunday morning, I woke early. The sun poured through the curtains, soft and golden. I brewed coffee and kept glancing at the clock. Every sound outside made my heart race, a passing car, the crunch of gravel. Then finally, I heard it, the familiar sound of Ethan's truck pulling into the driveway. I froze for a second, my breath caught in my throat. Then I walked to the door. When it opened, there they were, Ethan and Lily, standing side by side. He looked nervous, she looked like she'd been crying. "Hi, Mom," he said softly. "Hi, sweetheart," I whispered. Lily stepped forward, holding a small bouquet of daisies. "These are for you." I smiled through tears. "They're beautiful. Come in, both of you." As they stepped inside, I could see their eyes moving around the house, the photos, the familiar smells, the warmth they'd left behind. We sat at the table, and for a few moments no one spoke. Then Ethan took a deep breath. "Mom, I don't know how to start. I know saying sorry won't erase what happened, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry for the wedding, for the reception, for everything." I looked at him quietly. His eyes were filled with guilt, his hands trembling slightly. "You don't owe me perfection, Ethan. I just needed honesty." He nodded, tears welling up. "I should have done better." Then Lily spoke, her voice gentle but shaking. "Mrs. Mary, I owe you the biggest apology. I thought I was protecting our peace by keeping things small, but I realize now I was just shutting someone out, someone who only ever wanted to love us." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're my daughter now, Lily. Family doesn't start perfect. It grows. Sometimes it grows through pain." She started crying, her shoulders trembling. "She didn't mean to take him away from you." I smiled faintly. "You didn't. He just needed a little reminder to come home." We sat there in silence for a while, the kind of silence that feels like healing, the kind that says everything without a word. After dinner, Ethan walked into the living room and stopped in front of the old photo frames on the mantel. He picked up one, the picture of him and his father by the lake. He said quietly, I still remember that day. I smiled. He told me to take care of you. He nodded and said, I'll do better now, I promise. He nodded, my voice barely a whisper. That's all a mother could ask. Later that evening, we sat on the porch as the sun dipped below the trees. The air was cool and still. Lily leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. I looked at them, my son and his wife, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from forgetting pain, but the kind that comes from forgiving it. Ethan looked over at me and smiled. You know, Mom, Lily's been saying we should have a proper wedding photo with you in it this time. I laughed softly. I'd like that. He grinned. Then it settled. Next weekend, you're dressing up. I shook my head, smiling through tears. We'll see. But inside, my heart was already saying yes. When they finally left that night, Ethan hugged me tighter than he had in years. He said, I love you, Mom. I love you too, son. Always. As I watched their truck disappear down the road, I felt the ache in my chest ease. Not because everything was perfect again, but because love had found its way back home. I stood there under the quiet evening sky, the first stars flickering above, and I whispered, Thank you. Sometimes life doesn't give you the moments you expect. Sometimes it gives you something better, the chance to begin again. In the weeks that followed, Ethan called often, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to ask about my recipes, sometimes for no reason at all. Lily sent photos, messages, and even asked if I'd like to visit them soon. And for the first time in a long time, I said yes without hesitation. The loneliness that had filled my house didn't vanish overnight, but it softened. It turned into something else, a quiet gratitude. Every evening now, I sit by the window with a cup of tea, the same spot where I once cried. But now I smile instead, because I know that love, real love, finds its way back, no matter how far it strays. And that's what this whole journey taught me. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting who hurt you. It's about remembering who you are and choosing love anyway.
It's been months since that Sunday dinner, the night Ethan and Lily came back home. But even now, when I think about it, my heart still fills with warmth. The house doesn't feel so empty anymore. It's not because someone moved in or because the silence disappeared. It's because the silence itself changed. It's softer now. It feels like peace, not loneliness. I think back to those long days when I used to sit by the window, watching the road, wondering if anyone remembered me. I used to measure love by calls, by visits, by how often someone said my name. But life has taught me something different. Love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It hides inside apologies, inside the courage it takes to come back, inside forgiveness that heals more than it hurts. There was a time I believed I'd lost Ethan forever, that he had crossed into a new world where I didn't belong. But I see now that was only fear speaking. The truth is, love doesn't disappear when life changes. It just learns to take new shapes. When I see Ethan now, the man he's become, gentle, responsible, trying every day to do right, I realize that even the distance had its purpose. It taught both of us what mattered most. And Lily? She visits often now. She'll bring me flowers from her garden or a new recipe she wants to try. We sit in the kitchen and laugh about the smallest things, how my oven still burns cookies, or how her cat insists on sitting on her lap every morning when she works. It's simple, but it's real. One afternoon, she said something that stayed with me. She was helping me wash dishes and paused, looking thoughtful. "Mary," she said, "I used to think I had to protect our marriage from everyone, even from family. I thought love was something fragile, something that could break if too many hands touched it. But I was wrong. Love doesn't shrink when you share it. It grows." I smiled at her then, wiping my hands on a towel. "That's true, dear. Love is like bread dough. It rises best when you give it space and warmth." We both laughed, but we knew what I meant. Sometimes I walk through the house and catch glimpses of my past. The photo of Ethan's first day at school, the chair where David used to sit, the garden where we'd all gather on summer nights. For a long time, I saw those things as reminders of what I'd lost. Now I see them as reminders of what I've lived. Every season of life has its purpose. The early years are for building, the middle ones for giving, and the later ones, well, they're for understanding. I used to think being a mother meant always being needed, but now I understand. Being a mother means loving even when you're no longer needed in the same way. It's standing quietly behind your children as they build their own lives, ready to catch them if they fall, but never trying to walk for them. There's beauty in that quiet place. It's not emptiness, it's grace. I still talk to David sometimes, especially when I'm alone on the porch in the evenings. I'll look up at the stars and say, "You'd be proud of him, you know." And in those moments, I feel a calmness that's hard to describe, like he's listening, smiling. Ethan and Lily visit often now. They never come empty-handed. Sometimes it's groceries, sometimes just laughter. They'll stay for hours, and when they leave, they always say the same thing. "We'll be back soon, Mom." And they mean it. Not long ago, Ethan brought me a framed photo, one of the three of us, taken on the porch. I'm in the middle holding their hands. Lily said it was to replace the empty space on my mantle. When I hung it there, next to the old photo of David, I realized something quietly profound. Love had come full circle. The other day, Carol came over for tea. She looked around and smiled. "You seem lighter these days," she said. I laughed softly. Maybe I finally stopped carrying things that weren't mine to carry. She nodded. "That's a good way to put it." After she left, I sat by the window again, the same spot where I once waited, prayed, and cried. Now I just watched the world go by. The light through the trees, the mailman's footsteps, the hum of life continuing gently and endlessly. And I think about all that's happened, the hurt, the distance, the forgiveness, the return. If someone were to ask me what I learned through it all, I think I'd say this: love doesn't always come in the way we expect. Sometimes it leaves for a while, gets lost, forgets the way back. But if it's real, truly real, it finds its way home. As the sun sets, I light a small candle on the kitchen table, a quiet tradition I started for myself. One flame for hope, one heart for love, one story for grace. And tonight I whisper softly, "Thank you for bringing my boy back." Because in the end, this isn't a story about loss. It's a story about remembering and being remembered. And if there's one thing I'd tell anyone listening, it's this: don't let pride keep you from love. Don't let silence grow roots between hearts that still care. Say what you need to say, even if your voice trembles. Write the letter, make the call. Because sometimes one small act of love is all it takes to bring a family back together. I take a deep breath, close my eyes, and smile. The house is quiet, but it's the kind of quiet that feels alive. And for the first time in a long, long while, I feel whole.